There are quite a few seats in the front. Those of you at the back, you can actually take your seats here. There are a lot of seats in the front also. Kindly take your seats. We are just waiting for you to take the seats so that we can start the program. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are now ready to start the program. I'll request all those people who are standing in the back to please take their seats so that we can start this immediately. There are some seats in the front. Please take your seats here. You don't need to look for a seat. There are some seats in the front. Can we close the doors, please? Also, if this door can be closed so that there's no sound. I think we can start now. Please close the door. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Ambuja Neotia and the Charles Correa Foundation, it is my privilege to welcome you all to the 9th Charles Correa Memory Lecture. We will start the proceedings with a traditional lamp lighting ceremony. May I please request our chief guest today and guest speaker, Mr. Marlon Blackwell, Mr. Harshvardhan Neotia, our chairman, Mr. Ashish Acharya, our principal organizer, and Mr. Parthuranjan Das, to please come and light the lamp. So I'll request Malan to please be on the stage along with Mr. Neotia. May I now request Mr. Neotia to kindly felicitate our guest speaker with a small token of gratitude and appreciation. So we welcome Malan to Calcutta. Please give a round of applause to our guest speaker. And there's something more. Thank you so much. While I request Marlon to take his seat, I'll request Mr. Neotia to please come and give his opening address.
Good evening. Can you increase the volume, please? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Warm welcome to all of you, students of architecture, practicing architects, and citizens of Kolkata. This is the 9th Charles Correa Memorial Lecture, which we started in 2016. There are a few editions that got skipped during the COVID period, but we have tried to bring every year an eminent architect from overseas or from our country to come and share with us their practice with an idea that we draw inspiration from their work and we also expose them to our city. Usually we invite them to spend at least 2 or 3 days with us here. And my friend and architect Ashish Acharya has been very assiduously doing this task for these years. And he not only curates a very detailed program of sightseeing, and he also organizes smaller get-togethers with the architect visiting over lunches and dinners so that he can meet other practicing architects. And the whole purpose is just one. It is to share and to learn, and to also share what we are doing so that possibly some ideas also go back with the architect when he returns to his country or to his city. We are delighted to welcome Mr. Marlon Blackwell from Arkansas, USA. Warm welcome, Marlon. And thank you for taking the trouble of flying all the way from across, as they say, 7 seas to be here with us. And we are really honored. Well, we are in city center, which is one of the probably the largest public projects that Mr. Correa designed in Bengal and in Calcutta. And our group had the rare privilege and honor of working with him for about 3-4 years while this was being built. City Center opened in 2004. And as you can understand from the way it was planned and designed, it has become a part of the life of people of this, particularly of the Salt Lake area, and of course for Calcutta. His idea of putting human beings at the center of development, his idea of sustainability, his idea of seeing that we try to use as much as possible of the natural environment and not make everything which is very Western in its look and feel. He is somebody who brought modernism with an Indian soul. And that is what defined his amazing work, his amazing role as a torchbearer of modern architecture in India. So it is a homage to his memory and to his association with our group that we do this annually. We've had in the past speakers from Australia, Peter Suchbury, Anda Martin from Indonesia, Anjalendran from Sri Lanka, Solano Benitez from Paraguay, Richard Hassel from Singapore, Kasef Chaudhary from Bangladesh, Yung Ho Chang from China, though he's based in USA, Vibhuti Man Singh from Nepal, and then from India, of course, we had Brinda Somaya, K.T. Ravindran, Rahul Mehrotra, Kamal Hatkar, Uday Joshi, Sanjay Mohe, and others. So this year we have Marlon, and I was really amused to learn today at lunch that Marlon has been a wrestler. Did I get it right? Wow. And he has wrestled with a real bear, which is a big photograph that he has in his office. And we were all joking that probably an important attribute of an architect is to wrestle with the client, to fight his way to get his design implemented while there's resistance because it might lead to budgets going over, or it might lead to delays. So I have certainly realized, Marlon, that I have to be a little wary if we were to work with you, that you will fight with us and you will win that fight. But nevertheless, we are in so much admiration of the work that you have done. I not visited any of his projects, but my colleagues brought me a book, which is a very thick book, which he says is enough to give you a weightlifting kind of feel. And that has amazing pictures of many of his projects. Well, I will not talk about his design because he's here and he's here to share it. and I think it's best that he does it himself. But I just want to say one thing in conclusion is that Marlon and Mr. Correa shared many things in common. In fact, this initiative that we do, we often collaborate in terms of having a talk with the Correa family and take their advice whom we should invite. And every year we share names and then we invite. And of course, it's not that everyone we invite is able to come because of other clashing schedules and things like that. But we've been able to at least get one. Some years we had two architects who accepted, so we had two of them. Of course, the evening then gets very long, so we try to want to have it only one. So Mr. Correa and him both considered that the soul of architecture is really the person, the individual. And then how we try to bring the built environment in such a way that we are sustainable, we bring the outside inside in a relationship, we play with light and shadow, we use the climate, we use the land in a way that the architecture sits lightly on it. And this is really something that Marlon also, as you will see from his works, has tried to do. So there is a philosophical similarity in their work, though the interpretation is very, very unique and different. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. And without much ado, we go on with the program. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your address. May I request Mr. Ashish Acharji, architect, author, and principal organizer of Charles Correa Memorial Lecture, to introduce our distinguished speaker this evening.
Good evening, dignitaries, fellow architects, students, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this, the 9th edition of Charles Correa Memorial Lecture. I was fortunate to work with some of Korea's landmark projects that shaped my understanding of and later practice of architecture. At the onset, I must profusely thank Sri Harshvardhan Neotia, Chairman Ambuja Neotia, for his continued support and patronage for sustaining this much awaited and followed annual event in Kolkata. Thanks are also due to the Ambuja team working under the leadership of Vijay and Shubhro for this event. It is a privilege and honor to welcome you all to this extraordinary evening of architectural discourse in Calcutta. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting a speaker whose work does not merely occupy space, but actively transforms our understanding of it. Please join me in welcoming one of the most respected, deeply influential, and profoundly original voices in contemporary global architecture, Marlon Blackwell, Fellow of the American Institute of Architects. Marlon Blackwell's unique perspective on architecture was shaped by a life of diverse environments. Born in Germany to a military family, he grew up traversing various landscapes across the Philippines and the United States. This early exposure to changing horizons instilled in him a profound sensitivity to geography and culture. After graduating in architecture from Auburn University in Alabama, USA in 1980, he completed his master's from the Syracuse University in Florence, Italy in 1991. It was during this European tenure that he deeply immersed himself in historical context and classical spatial principles, merging universal spatial ethics with grounded regional sensibility. In 1992, he founded Marlon Blackwell Architects at Fayetteville alongside his partner in life and work, Merayati Blackwell. He has proven that architecture of the highest caliber does not require a sprawling metropolis to thrive. It requires vision, empathy, and an unyielding commitment to local culture. He recently capped a legendary 33-year tenure as a E. Fay Jones Distinguished Professor at the University of Arkansas, where he also served as a department chair for many years. His pedagogical influence extends far across prestigious institutions, having served as Louis Kahn Visiting Professor at Yale University and holding distinguished visiting chairs at institutions like Cornell and University of Michigan. At the heart of Merlin's work is a democratic belief great design should happen anywhere, at any scale, and on any budget. He famously describes his architectural ethos as striving for an economy of means for a maximum of meaning. He takes everyday overlooked typologies and elevates them into transcendent public spaces. You can see his philosophy come alive across his iconic projects, the Thurden School campus, the Woolworker Hall, and Stephen L. Anderson Design Center, St. Nicholas Eastern Orthodox Church, to name a few. He has been recognized with countless design awards globally. He received Cooper Hewitt National Design Award in Architecture in 2016 and the American Institute of Gold Medal in 2020. Most recently, his office was awarded the prestigious Mies Crown Hall Americas Prize. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the presence of a master storyteller of form, light, and material. Please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to architect Marlon Blackwood. Thank you.
The screen is to go forward and that is to go backwards.
Yeah. It's the, that's not the first one. Yeah, that one. Yeah. This one. Is this level okay for you? Sure. Right. I think this is good. Yeah. Good evening. How's everyone? Thank you, Ashish. That was a very generous introduction. And I'd like to say it's been great so far. My 48 hours in Calcutta, most memorable so far are the people, the hospitality, and your amazing food. My wife is from Malaysia, and she's so sorry she cannot be here, if nothing else, just for the food. So in any event, we'll have to come back. But I would like to say it's truly an honor to be here with you all in Calcutta, but also to be able to deliver the annual Charles Correa Memorial Lecture. To be invited to speak in memory of Charles Correa, surely one of India's greatest architects, is both humbling and deeply meaningful. Correa's work continues to resonate across generations, not just for its beauty, but for its profound intellectual and cultural ambition. What I've always admired most about Correa is his relentless search for authenticity, his insistence that architecture in India could not simply be imported or imposed, but it had to emerge from its own climate, culture, and patterns of life. He pursued with great rigor and imagination a truly Indian architecture, one grounded in the local, in memory, and in place, to imagine spaces that are rooted yet inventive and works of architecture that do not mimic the global, but converses with its own ground and grows from listening, not assertion. And yet he was never nostalgic. Correa's work remained unmistakably and stubbornly urban, forward-looking, and contemporary in character. He embraced the completeness of modern life while refusing to relinquish the deeper continuities of tradition. That balance between the timeless and the immediate, between identity and change, is what makes his legacy so enduring and I believe so relevant today. And it is in this spirit that I hope to share some thoughts with you this evening with our own work and what we're trying to do in the spirit of Charles. Now, you see up on the screen here, which is essentially the cover of our monograph, the large, heavy doorstop that I gave Harsh earlier today. A lot of folks, when they think about an architect practicing in a faraway place like Arkansas, they ask, well, how can you have a radical practice in a place like that? And I have to remind them that the ongoing idea of radical practice is not about being avant-garde or revolutionary for its own sake, but rather we use its 14th century origins as an adjective from the late Latin radicalus word, radicalus, meaning root, as in relating to or proceeding from a root or roots, recognizing that a fidelity to our roots, to the fundamentals, is necessary for us to affect change, transformations in our place or the places where we work. In Henry Thoreau's words, heaven is under our feet as well as above our heads. And so for us, this fundamental propositions underwrite our equally deceptively simple radical practice, a practice therefore of materiality, construction and experience, and of deep attentiveness to the qualities and necessities of the place in which it is situated. All of this is take on the issue particular to the advancement, the development, and the enrichment of place. Place is the canvas, architecture is the medium, and it's shaped by the forces of nature and public life into particular form. We like to say we make work in the place, of the place, and for the place. This is our office in Fayetteville, a building we bought, an old mercantile building. We had very little money, $69 a square foot, which is nothing in the US, to restore and to remake this building. We just took all the openings that were in the elevation and replaced them with windows that we love. Everything from Breuer to Leverowitz, a whole essay in windows. And then I paid a fellow to paint the building, because that's all we could do, with these stripes. Each stripe, it was just one fellow, and it took him 4 months to paint all the stripes. And when he was finished, he said, I said, well, this looks great. What do you think? And he goes, well, next time I'll call you, don't call me. So any event, so this idea of in the place, of the place, for the place, but also sometimes, see if I can get it to switch, necessarily out of place. Now, this is important. And when you come into our office, everyone is confronted by the bear. And it is true, I was a wrestler when I was in high school, and we did have to wrestle for practice one day, a live wrestling bear. Now, I won't go into that story. I can only tell you that at that time, I was the same height that I am now and weighed 105 pounds, taking on a 400-pound bear. It did not turn out well, but I'll stop there. Nonetheless, when folks come into our office, this is the existential question, is how do I take on the bear? How do I take on challenges much larger than myself with great purpose and fearlessness, right? And a willingness to deal with the uncertainties that lie ahead, to be vulnerable, to deal with the difficulties, and do it in the spirit, of optimism. And that is what I ask all of our folks who come to do that. Now, when we talk about place, I like to say that place is really defined as a tangible representation of that intangible society that lives within it. I like to call this placeness. This concept of placeness is central to our work. Understanding that, as renowned Indian architect Anik Bhagwat says, every act of building is local, contingent, and requires empathy rather than prophecy. To make an architecture of placeness, it is necessary for us to embrace everything, even the bad things about a place, to go below the surface, to the underbelly, so we can understand these things and incorporate them in who we are and what we can make as an architecture of place, in the place, and for the place, what it can be. So often, this is a story of transformation and conditional optimism, taking the world as is given to us and representing it on our own terms. Now, this idea of out of place, the architecture betwixt and between, is often what we're doing. We're sort of weaving between where we are and where we hope to be. When we bring together disparate understandings, forces, and observations of situation and place, we like to refer to them as abstract unions, often found in a place of unholy unions. And these encompass our approach and help us address questions of practice versus theory, of engagement versus detachment from the world, and questions of form and relationships, such as relationships between that which is nature-made and that which is culture-made, and seeking the patterns that connect them. These are really great sources of inspiration. And frankly, most of the work that we do is in a place where detachment isn't really even an option, even if we want it to be. So for my partner, Ati, and I, rather than a removal from reality, abstraction for us is the process of connecting to place, generating a productive tension between the local and the global, what we like to call the glocal, looking for possibilities, as Harsh was saying, for using an economy of means for a maximum of meaning. That was Ashish that was saying that. But that's what we're trying to do, is trying to do the very most with the least, to solve 5 things with 1 thing. For us, 1 + 1 can never equal 2. It always has to equal 3, 5, 7. That's how we build the value proposition. But also, in the way in which we're working in this toggling back and forth between the local and the universal, we're hoping to establish a condition in our work of the strangely familiar, of taking, again, the world as it's giving to us and representing it in how we find it. Now, I want to say that we're often talking about starting with something very ordinary as a starting point to find some kind of resonance with the locality of where we're at, and then transforming that into something elevated, into a true work of architecture that transcends that locality, that particularity, or even that vernacular. Now, long before projects began to offer the prospect of travel, teaching did. And this is how I met Charles Correa at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology at MIT in 2002. I was there as a visiting professor, and he was there working on the Brain and Cognitive Sciences building and also teaching. At that time, the work in my practice, and let me see if I can get to his work here, was really just beginning. This, of course, is Charles's work in Cambridge, Mass, that he was involved in the process. And at the same time, the work in my practice was just beginning to increase in scale as we were designing the Blessings Golf Clubhouse. Now, as luck would have it, we discovered that we were both office mates in a tiny office together in MIT. And we shared a computer, a Macintosh, this simple computer that neither of us could figure out how to turn on. And so we sat there bemused for a good part of our time together, and realizing that we were both, in our own ways, dinosaurs. But nonetheless, I confess I was a bit starstruck, and I wished I'd asked him more questions and gotten to know him better. But I'm truly honored to be here today giving this lecture in his name. I want to go back just a bit because I realized I had my slides slightly out of order here. So this idea that we've been working with, of working from the particular, I'm going to keep trying because has really allowed us to work in a variety of types and scales of work, everything from a carport to schools to hospitality. We're getting into healthcare now, even to a new American embassy in the poorest country in the world, in the Central African Republic. So it's given us great opportunity over time to develop, I would say, an agility conceptually and ability to execute at all types of scales. And you can see where we're working not only local, but regional, national, and as I alluded to, international, in the work that we have been doing for the State Department. So, by the way, I want to say that at the time, there were a lot of buildings being built in Cambridge in 2002, 2005 was a big building area. Everyone from Stephen Hull to Frank Gehry. I want to say that undoubtedly, in my mind, this is the best building that was built in that time. Elegantly restrained, incredibly thoughtful, and deeply social. A really humane place in which to do research on these important topics of brain and the neurosciences. And our good old computer again. So I'm going to start off all of this. I hope this has been a reasonable setup to dive into the work with just two projects that sort of underscore an ethos and then set up the rest of the work that I'll show you in some ways, illustrating ideas and principles alike. The first is a small project in Springdale, Arkansas, the St. Nicholas Eastern Orthodox Church. And this is a small community of Orthodox Christians who were worshiping essentially in a rundown office building, as you see on the left, in downtown Springdale. And they had a very aestheticized form of worship and were dreaming about having a new sanctuary, a new fellowship hall. And one of their parishioners had died and left them some money. And so they bought some land out by the interstate near some other churches and up next to a city park. And they brought us out on the site, and it came with a small house and this welding shed. And they looked at us and they said, "Look at this welding shed. What do you think? Could you make this into a church and a sanctuary and a fellowship hall?" And I said, "Oh, you mean like tear it down and build on the footprint?" And they go, "Oh, no, we only have $100 a square foot left after buying the land. So that's all we can afford. Can you turn this welding shed into a church?" And of course, our hearts sank. We were like, "Oh my, what do you do?" And so we began to think about what is an architect can do that doesn't cost very much. Things like proportion and scale. They're free, essentially. And we started thinking about the Greek Orthodox churches of the 2,000 years ago, the sort of proportional systems they would use. We went back to origins, as we often do, and began understanding that system to create a new abstract figure along the interstate, the St. Nicholas Church. And with all of the icons and the colors and so forth, the symbols that they desired for in their facade, using just a box rib metal system, and then creating custom details, transitional details at the corners and edges to create the seamlessness of the system. And then we added a canopy, which is a little bit of Corbusier, because I believe everything goes better with a little bit of Corb, and created this new figure, the sacred face of the church itself. How did we do it? Well, we left the building as is, and we wrapped it in a new metal studs and skin, and then we added 10 feet to the front of it to create a narthex, which then got you, runs north-south. It gets you on an axis going from west to east, which is traditional in the denomination, with movable walls that open up when they overflow certain times of the year into the fellowship hall. So very simple, all again for $100 a square foot. And we cut a window into the existing building to let morning light spill in. The iconostasis is made from local bars of steel, just stock steel. They needed a dome, and they couldn't put a dome on top of the building because of the pre-engineered existing structure. So they allowed us to put one in the plenum, but they couldn't afford the dome that we had spec'd out of fiberglass. And our contractor, well, he couldn't build one either because he didn't think he could make it to the level of craft that we would want. So we were stuck. What could we do? And suddenly my contractor had an idea. He said, "Look, I know a metal worker out in the countryside, 20 miles away, and he loves beer. And so for 2 cases of beer, he'll trade you this radar dish, this satellite dish, and that can become the dome." And so we took it, we shipped it, back, we drove it back, we skim coated it in plaster, we jacked it up on a scissor lift, and they have their dome. So that's kind of how we roll in Arkansas. And Father John was so excited, and I was too, because I said, "Hey, Father John, you have a direct access to God now." And he pointed out it was pointed in the wrong direction. And I said, "Yeah, that's true." But then there was somebody else on the building committee that said, "I know where else we can get a bishop's chair for free." I said, "Really? Where? What is it?" And he goes, "Well, it's out of walnut, and it's covered in purple crushed velvet upholstery." And I said, well, where can you get it? And he goes, well, it's a part of an ad campaign at a local liquor store. And I said, oh, okay. And he goes, I just don't know what we're going to do with the embroidered CR on it. I go, what do you mean? He goes, Crown Royal. Father John overheard us, walked over and said, no, Christ the Redeemer, get the chair. So that's how we roll. So in 2013, we got a phone call from the American Institute of Architects National Honor Awards program to let us know that this had won an Institute Honor Award, the highest award you can get in the United States. And they said we were looking at the budget and we were noticing it's very inexpensive. So we did a history check across the program, and we've discovered that this is the least expensive building to ever receive a National Honor Award in the United States. And so that made us very, very happy because it underscored what we've been trying to do for the last 30 years, is to demonstrate that architecture can happen anywhere, at any scale, at any budget, and for anyone. It's not just reserved for the few, it's for everyone. And so that's guided us. And so this simple figure along the interstate has been, again, quite influential in our work. Simultaneously, as we were building that some 15 years ago, we were also working on our first national project at the Indianapolis Museum of Art and Nature Park, the 100 acres Art and Nature Park. It's called the Ruth Lilly Pavilion, and it's a visitor's pavilion into the park. And it was something that's in a site that's been very disturbed over time. It's in the oxbow of the White River near downtown Indianapolis. It was a quarry in the oxbow for limestone to build the interstate, which filled with water, has a lake. Due to indiscriminate development upriver, it floods. It's had 5 100-year floods in the last 8 years. And so this flooding cuts across and cuts off the oxbow. Out of the 100 acres we had, when you factor in floodways and floodplains, we had 0.67 acres to build on. It's so not hard to find the site. So this is essentially the site. We had a very fecund wet site, and we had to elevate it at 5 feet out of the forest floor to allow for water to pass through to stay out of the flood range. And so working with our landscape architect, Ed Blake, he came up with a brilliant idea of creating a series of figured mounds in which this structure could sit astride and allow the water to channel underneath it, and then allow for folks who are walkers or wheelchairs who are kind of moving through the park on this network of pathway journeys to be able to move up the mounds in a very simple way. And so it just sort of very quietly sits in the hill, elevated out of the forest floor. And it's all made out of one material, an ipe wood, and then with an exoskeleton, which holds it all together. A simple system that allows light and air and water to go through it. We discovered these leaves on the site that had been eaten away by insects, and we were very interested in how to make a surface, a structure. The structure of the leaves are intact, but it's more porous, the leaf, and so allowing that water and light to ventilate just like in a canopy of the forest, and looking at the microscopic structure of the butterfly wings, just something very light, that really understand how to put this together. And here we developed a whole system with the exoskeleton and the shadows of that exoskeleton imprinting itself in this screen, which it makes the canopy, the floor, and the walls kind of all wrap over. So it's one material, essentially one structural system. And then inserting in that a place to get out of the sun, to relax, a place to assess the surroundings, a very simple living room in the woods, along with services, bathrooms, kitchen, and small office adjacent to that, all made out of local oak. And then it nestles in the wood and slowly weathers along with the trees that it's surrounded by, except for the black box that is the abstraction inset. And so this became our first national award winner. So together, these projects are figures and systems, and they are woven, the ideas and the ethos of these projects, throughout all the projects we do. And we're a perfect setup for this next project that we were able to do last year. This, of course, is the U.S. Pavilion at the 2025 Venice Biennale, Architecture Biennale. We were very fortunate to be chosen, our team, working with the lead commissioner, or the dean of our school, Peter McKeith, who had the brilliant idea of choosing a theme that was about porch, an architecture of generosity. Everybody understands the porch. In America, that in the U.S., everybody understands the generosity of the porch, what it represents, that framework, that proscenium for life to happen, and that threshold between the public world and the private world of a house or another type of structure. So we were asked to transform the existing U.S. pavilion. Of course, it's located in the Giardini in Venice. Our team was, we led the team for the structure on the outside, along with the landscape architects, Julie Bargman, 10 by 10. And then, of course, Man-Made was involved with Stephen Burks, with all of the furniture and accessories, and then the interior by Peter McKeith and John Bolkins, who were head of the interiors team. So this is the existing pavilion. I would say it's quite underwhelming. It has been the focus of transformation, I have to say, and focus of failed transformations over and over, whether it's the Art Biennale or the Architecture Biennale, and a tough place to work in. But we felt we couldn't do a porch. We certainly couldn't allow this to stand in as a porch, the portico that you see here. And here's some of the adventures in trying to transform this over time. But our idea was a very simple one. We knew we were giving a courtyard, and these are some of the initial sketches. When Peter introduced the idea, he said, I would really like for you to design a proposal that would go along with our proposal. And I said, absolutely. When's it due? He said, in 2 weeks. And I was like, well, how long have you known about this? For a few months, but I've been thinking about it. So anyways, we had to work quickly. But I believe talent can work quickly. So our idea was to develop a unifying structure, a porch, a system of all mass timber wood that encapsulates the courtyard. So we transform the porch and the courtyard into a porch yard, a new typology. And then there's a variety of different types of programs that go on. There's passive comfort, of course. There's a furniture lounge, a cooking station, front lawn, gathering, stage, all kinds of programming that would happen that would bring people in. And something very important too in this context was the idea of shade. And again, it's just a simple system. We're using the courtyard to put massive heavy timber, to cantilever, because you can't touch the existing building, this porch as a flying porch that floats out beyond the existing pavilion. And so it's a very, very simple system of mass timber and then finely grained wood pieces. And here you begin to get a sense of it sitting. It's in the central part of the Giardini. On its right side is the Israeli pavilion. On the left side is the Nordic pavilion by Sverre Finn. And so a very critical juncture. And so we wanted to be good neighbors, so we began to doing these sort of inverted figure against the portico to begin to shape that so that it would not obscure the adjacent pavilions. And then kind of shifted it out and let it become a kind of a lantern of light, a vessel of light to capture light and then translate that through, but at the same time, make shade. Because wherever there's shade, I believe there's people, especially in this kind of climate, it's very important to have that. And miraculously, what happened is it became probably one of the most popular pavilions in the Giardini, in the Biennale, of people gathering for music, for poetry readings, for discussions, and just hanging out either by oneself or with other folks, other groups, and became quite popular. And then the icing on the cake is the blue. That's called Haint Blue. This was brought to our culture by the Gicigula culture from Western Africa, who were enslaved, who brought this tradition with them, which is to paint the soffits of their houses and porches this haint blue, which looks like water. Haints are troubled spirits, and so that would keep them out. And so we like to say only good spirits welcome, the troubled spirits please stay away. But that was part of our tradition we brought forward too. Now here you can begin to see how all of it comes together, and then this beautiful central area all made out of the soils from Venice, of compressed earth and bricks. The landscape architects came up with a gathering space in the middle. It was really quite active, very dynamic place. And then the interior, an open call across the country to provide an interpretation of porch. What is porch to you? And so you could be an artist, you could be a non-architect or an architect. Over 500 submissions and 52 were chosen to be celebrated and put in, along with a host of other things, drawings, fabrics, the things that man-made brought to bear too, that dealt with the idea of local culture. So very successful. Set records for the American Pavilion. Over 350,000 came to visit, and it was a great success there. It was designed to be dismounted. It has been dismounted and has now been shipped back to the U.S. and will be re-erected as an outdoor event center at the Crystal Bridges American Museum of Art. So its life will go on. So the idea of the porch, I would like to say that every project we do has a porch. I noticed with Charles, there's a porch, there's a courtyard, there's always something there that's an interface between the public world and the private world. And so we had the opportunity to design a series of figures, a series of buildings in the largest urban park in the United States, 4,500 acre urban park, Shelby Farms Park. This was being designed by James Corner, Field Operations, the same landscape architect that did the High Line in New York. They had been working this for several years. And this has a very tortured history, this park. This 4,500 acres used to be a penal farm where prisoners worked the land. They raised cattle, they raised crops to feed themselves, and whatever they didn't sell was sold off to the county. And so this went on from the 20s until the 70s. And then it became no longer an acceptable form of rehabilitation. And so it was turned over to the county. It's in Memphis, Tennessee. So you see the bridge from Arkansas across the Mississippi River. That's on the west side of Memphis. So on the east side of Memphis is where this penal farm is. And you can see the prisoners out in the field and how they worked that for years. So then it just became county land, and they didn't know how to take care of it. Speculators were coming in, but it had all these natural assets, and they felt strongly they needed a park on this side of the city. So they formed a 501c and called it Shelby Farms Park, which from the 70s forward was a very nice park, but didn't have a lot of identity. It did not reflect the socioeconomic and racial diversity of Memphis, Tennessee. And it was also often in the red from a profitability standpoint. So we were asked to come in and make these new programs, these new sources of revenue and activity for the park. And as you can see here, as we explored the park, we found that wherever there was shade, there were people. Table 20 feet away, no shade, no people. Now, you know all about that here in Kolkata. I'm not telling you anything new. But we also went back to origins again and looking at the vernacular, porches, breezeways, what we call dog trots in the vernacular in the South, where you can create cooling breezes in these narrow slotted entrances. And so we were asked to do about 7 structures, a visitor center, a restaurant event center, an event stage, a lakeside pavilions, what we call the crickets, as well as a boathouse and kiosks and concessions. And then enlarging the lake at the center of the park, called Heart of the Park, then figuring out ways in which to arrange these buildings and create a dynamic scapes and play areas and edges along the lake to really activate this part of the park. So the first building is a visitor center. So this is an 8,000 square foot building with an 8,000 square foot porch. So we're really into porches here. So this was with very little money. So what we did was come up with a way to use local wood, the cypress, local third growth cypress, and aluminum bar grate. So the kind of aluminum bar grate you would find in agricultural or sort of settings, what you normally walk on, we turned it into a cladding system because we know they're very durable. It could be made into operable doors and shutters. And this created this diaphanous skin, along with several dog trots, which create cooling breezes and entrances into this landscape with a 32-foot cantilever, which allows it to be shaded about 80% of the year. So this allows them to program this outdoor area to create an additional revenue stream for the visitor center. And of course, like, you know, even here in Kolkata, same thing in Memphis. If you're in the shade, you're still sweating. So we have to ventilate the shade, and we did it with 5 20-foot big-ass fans. And that's the name of the fans. So I'm not just making that up. That's the trade name of that. So, but anyways, they're using it for yoga, the receptions, weddings, all kinds of gatherings, which is really a fantastic thing because it keeps it activated and it really becomes the nerve center and the threshold for entrance into this park. And again, this diaphanous skin of the aluminum reflects the light. So in the mornings, it can be a pinkish light. In the evenings, a blue or orangish light. But it's constantly changing with the light. We like to say it's an architecture imbued with the order of change. And so the other figures in this ensemble are like the boathouse. Again, the stage pavilion for not only the event lawn, but also for activities on the lake. These cricket shade pavilions, they're great for family reunions and such. They provide their own shade, places to cook out. You can see it's a very limited palette of materials, just aluminum bar grate, some local wood, and some zinc-like panels. And then the restaurant event center, which is a 500-seat conference center along with a local restaurant facing west. So you can get those great sunsets. It's an 80-foot deep porch, more people sitting outside than inside. And it really activated the park at night, a total transformation. And the commercial appeal, the newspaper Memphis calls this Memphis's Park. Since it's opened in 2016, it's been in the profit ever since. It's increased its attendance by over 100%, and it's increased its racial diversity, socioeconomic diversity by over 100% as well. So it goes to, I think, underscore that architecture, while it is key, I think, to strengthening the institutions and to the transformations of landscapes, cities, and communities. So in that spirit, we've been very interested in the role of architecture as medicine. Architecture that can be either disruptive in care or actually a real partner in care, in health and well-being. So we've had a great opportunity, we just finished, of designing a National Policy Institute for Whole Health. And this is on the campus of the Crystal Bridges American Art Museum. Its founder is Alice Walton, and she's very much interested in changing our healthcare system in the United States. We like to say we don't have a healthcare system in the United States. We have a sick care system. It's just there when you get ill. But what if you could, doctors were challenged to keep you healthy, and that the way they build is not to treat you, but is ways in which they kept you healthy over your life and put you in charge of your healthcare team, the individual in charge. These are the kinds of radical propositions that she's interested in doing. So she needed an institute, and simultaneously to kind of complete this idea of hers of this collision between art and wellness. So the whole American Museum campus there is a confluence of art, nature, architecture, wellness, and education. So she's also just built a new medical college that has just opened as well, as you see in number 4. In number 2 is the Crystal Bridges American Art Museum by Moshe Safdie. It's just expanded, just opened a few weeks ago, a new parking center, and then the Whole Health Institute that we had the opportunity to do. Now, at the top level of this is also another institute called Art Bridges, which is about getting art out of the basements of museums and into communities, and as well to begin to, oh, thank you. Am I getting raspy? Make art central to this this idea of whole health. As it was been told to me, she said, "I've never seen anybody frowning looking at art or in a museum. It's restorative. It's good for the well-being, as is nature, as is great architecture, as is education. All of these things come together, and we have to think about them as a whole." And so what we're working with is a building that responds to its place, to a big formal gesture, to a ravine that it wraps around, and then into the eye level, to these, again, network journeys, pathways that people move to come onto the campus at eye level, a community room, and then this threshold into the site itself. And so the ground floor is all public and free. It's like a museum. They have a cafe, they have event spaces, education spaces, and that is philosophically, metaphorically, I say, and actually, literally grounding the Institute through the stone. And then the top two floors are the Whole Health Institute and Art Bridges. And you can see the ravines, the section cut, and how these buildings sort of interface with those ravines. Now, where I'm at in the Arkansas, it's Northwest Arkansas. We're not in the Delta. We're in the mountains, in the Ozark Mountains, and we're known for our karst topography and our hardwood forests. And it's something that we've wanted to bring forward in the work. Now, our cash crop in Northwest Arkansas is rocks. We got really thin soils and we can't grow anything. That's why we have lots of chickens, lots of beef, and that's it. So, but hard to grow much. So what used to happen is people, when they were building there, the only materials they really had to clad their that were durable, their homes, were rocks. And so they would take stones and they would grout them to vertically as a veneers, giant stones, to a schoolhouse, to a church, to a house. And this would be called giraffe stone. You can see it in the vernacular on the upper left. And so our idea was to kind of create our own version of this, to vary it in a mosaic way, the colors, by taking stones from different parts of Arkansas and the adjacent state of Oklahoma to get a wonderful mixture. And then to use rope joints, grout joints that sit proud of the stone, that create texture out of the pattern as light hits it, and reinterpret this local vernacular and the material culture of our place to pull that forward into the future. And then this idea too that the upper levels could be a series of brise-soleils that represent the forest, the verticality of the forest. But rather than using wood, we're using brass, kind of pre-finished brass. And then we're beveling the edges of those fins that help with sun control to reflect the light as the sun moves. So at some points they're in shadow, and some points they're being lit. So again, this idea of the order of change. And that makes the palette. And of course, we always use a full-scale mock-up to really understand how these details go together. And then you begin to see how it all comes together, the base and the top and these gentle curves that begin to soften the building and again, help it respond more organically to the surrounding natural geology and fauna. So the theme here is the cave and the forest and how they come together. And you can see how that's translated with these series of clefts and undercarriages up above, below, and then of course the forest and the filtering of light through the brise-soleil above. And then this sets up this sort of porosity down below the landscape, places again that create shade are another interpretation of porch. And then taking that softening on the outside and soften the inside radius is really trying to get away from boxes, but just simple radiuses, softening, and then thinking about very gentle, kind of humble ways to get in, to slide in, never to enter frontally. So you can see the community room, the beginning of the art gallery as you come along eye level, and then the threshold of the dog trot and the simple low entrance. And you slide in, and this is the first thing that you're confronted with. So the idea of the cave and the forest is brought to the interior. This limestone floors, this wood all milled on 3-axis CNC. This is local pecan trees, nut trees that are nearby to help the idea of the canopy of the forest to be brought through. And then colors. This is all my partner, Ati, kind of bringing all of this palette of materials and colors together, plaster for the walls, and again, just spaces that flow together. And all of the color comes from this painting by Asher Durand called Kindred Spirits. And it's really about the sort of pioneering of the American landscape. But embedded in this is, again, the idea of the karst typography and the forest, but over 100 different colors. You would look at it and say, well, it's green and brown. But no, through our research, tons of colors. So all of the materials are clean materials, no off-gassing, natural wools, fibers, natural wood, natural stone, which is its own deep carbon sink in and of itself. And then we use this canopy as an acoustical shroud. It also covers up all the infrastructure in the building, the ductwork, sprinklers, things of that nature. Again, a pre-event space becomes also an art gallery here. All the art is based on well-being, wellness, the body, mind, spirit, those sorts of things. That's sort of the theme. And then really looking at how this datum kind of organizes all the disparate program elements below. The stair is actually suspended through a steel strap sandwiched between the wood. All the wood is just plywood. And we're detailing this wood, the ceiling, so that it anticipates where there are interventions, like how the stair begins to come up into it. It sort of anticipates that to make these beautiful soft joints for it to come together. Up above, we were challenged to make a work environment that's truly healthy and great place to work, calming and comfortable. So one of the programs that this National Institute, the Whole Health Institute, came up with is, as a worker, you're free to be a nomad. You have 20-something places you can work. You have your own place, but you can take your lap, you can go wherever you wish. So you have lounges, they have porches, outside, inside. We detached all of the program from the perimeter, so no one has a privileged view. Everybody has, that we democratize the views, and the light is 50 feet wide, so we get 25 feet of light from both sides, natural light, and you just sort of flow through this. There are private areas here, but it's always transparent. And so there's a great deal of collegiality and connectivity to nature and to each other in this work environment, and creates its own ecosystem. And a variety of open spaces again, and sound isolation spaces. There's a boardroom here. One of the important things, again, were these built-in terraces, open office, event spaces, but a meditation space, a place to recharge, a restorative space. We thought it would be like for 1 or 2 people. We came up with the idea of a 30-foot high cone, but we bent the cone to the north, to true north, to capture the temperature of light and to obscure the source of the light. So rather than it being about a view, it's really about illumination. And this is a kind of a diagram of how that works. In anti-space, you come in to sit on the bench, you remove your shoes, place your shoes in a niche, and then you go into the cone. We didn't know quite how to build it, so the builders helped us there. Rather than build it from the bottom up, they actually built it from the top down to really make sure that they hit it in the right place through the roof to get the light to come through just right. And here you can see, so it's all clad the floor in sheep's wool here, and you can sit on the floor, sit on the low wall. It's naturally lit. And what's happened is become the #1 meeting place for all of the people who work there, a team meeting room, as well as for the public. The team meeting comes because everybody can sit on the floor and they're all at the same eye level. Again, I'm not telling you anything, because it's part of the culture in many ways. My wife's Malaysian, so I understand that. But in the U.S., it's like a revelation. Oh, wow, I don't have to be all, annoyed by people when I'm sitting on the floor looking at it. Changes the tone and temperament of the meetings. But you can see up above the light as it comes through in these mysterious ways. And so some of the variety of porches, carved undercarriage areas where you can go throughout the day. You just follow the light, follow the shade. And then the community porch, how this all begins to kind of capture outdoor event spaces as well. And so it becomes really a whole environment. And then art, too, is a big part of that. We're currently programming digital art in these big vitrines, which is actually the columns that support this stairway that supports this big bridge. Everything you see here is suspended from a roof truss, so all the structure is in tension as it makes this kind of curved bridge. So very excited, a confluence and intersection of art, nature, architecture, and now wellness. So this happened in the overflow parking area, this transformation. So they needed a place to put cars. It's still the US, we have to have our cars, you know. So what's more American than a parking garage, right? So I want to show you a parking garage we were asked to do, which is not that far away, just across the ravine. You can see in the distance there. You see the crane up there, that's where they're building the medical school, which is just completed. So an 800-car parking garage. And we asked the question, well, I mean, we're placing this on a campus about art. Could the parking garage engage in that discussion about art? And so people, if this is the primary where they're entering, it's also an intermodal place where bicycles, walking, a shuttle picks you up. Our question to the owner was, what more can a parking garage be? And she returned it with a question. She says, well, what more can it be? And I said, well, what if we built a proscenium for art and performance that's 150 feet wide by 5 stories high? And as you get out of your car, you promenade down vertically through a giant porch of art and performance and to an understory of a bar, cafe, a visitor center, onto a public plaza. She liked that idea. So we did it. And so it's very simple. You can see just, again, working with a similar language of the fins and such. And the porch becomes its own sort of headpiece. We call it the fish head. But it also opens up the parking garage, and the way in which we light it with natural light makes it not a dark and mysterious place, a sense of more security than you normally would get in most parking garages. And here's the plaza. It's done by Brian Haynes Studio out of Philadelphia. He's riffing on the big stones that we did on the building, turning those into big paving areas, water play, and allows the forest to remain where this is at the edge of the forest as part of the plaza. And so this has become the #1 gathering place on the campus here as people come. Families from the community around also come and stay here and hang out here. And then this is the big proscenium with sculpture, art, places to lounge. They have music performances up there as well. So it too becomes part of that dialogue, that intersection of art, nature, architecture, and wellness as part of this interface. And here, even in the understory, it's all a promenade proscenium, both vertical and horizontal. And you get a sense of that, how that works with the section as well. And these are now becoming places for weddings, yeah, I know, but it's very American. Get married in a parking garage. I'm joking, but nonetheless, but it is happening in the plaza, that is. But here's just some of the kind of feeling of that. All simple metal. Now, one of the things that I'm going to be showing you as I go through this, in order to find specific identity, because we're just using off-the-shelf metal panel systems, what could we do to take it to another level? When you use this much metal, what we've discovered is Sherwin-Williams will allow us to use custom automotive body paints to make the paint. So we use metal flake, we use the deep luster of automotive body paint, and the premium on this is very little because you're using a lot of volume. So this is actually my grandmother's 1964 Pontiac Tempest, an aqua azure blue with the ivory upholstery interior, and that's the color palette in which we did this, which, you know, the sky being the bluest thing, it all kind of came together. But it's a one of a kind, and then we light it at night in a variety of ways, lighting programs that really allow this to be kind of type of a very active and dynamic beacon in the park. So again, it's a type of infrastructure, but how do we take it to the next level? Just by asking the question, how might it be otherwise? Imagine, what if? And those are the kind of journey we like to take our clients on. And so this idea of transformation brought us to another place outside of our typically where we work in Detroit, Michigan. And if you've ever been to Detroit, you know it's a tough place. It is a somewhat like 40% of abandoned or empty properties. emptiness is sort of a thing, and no one's unaffected by it. It's having a resurgence right now, but there was a traditional African-American liberal arts college, Mary Grove College, located in the Livermore McNichols neighborhood in Detroit, in what we call 6 Mile, that had lost enrollment, had gotten financial difficulty, and had to shut down, which was a dagger in the heart of this neighborhood, because this college was the heartbeat, the spiritual and literal heartbeat of the neighborhood. So the Kresge Foundation came in and decided to take over the college and repurpose it into a cradle-to-career school for 1,000 students. So from the time you're an infant until you're 20 years old, you can go to school here, and then you can make the decision where you go on to college or go into the vocational trades or other types of skill sets, develop other types of skill sets. So the cornerstone of all of this, of course, is an early childhood learning center. You have to capture students or children in their first 5 years. They're forming whole ideas about learning, cognitive and restorative mental acuity, and ability to think. And so very important to put on this campus, a campus of collegiate Gothic stone buildings over 100 years old. But this could only be one story because of the young children. So we did a mat building, essentially, and we designed a series of courtyards. So I'm going to show us several projects with courtyards, because that's one of the things that I admire most about Correa's work, is the celebration of the Indian courtyard as a kind of centerpiece in daily life, whether private or in the public. And so these courtyards are wayfinding areas for the inside, they're controlled play areas, and they're also ways to distribute light in a very wide and flat building. And this is the neighborhood it's in. So this is the fabric, all these single homes with a commercial corridor there, and then the campus itself. And you can begin to see how it situates itself amongst the other figures on the campus. And so here we go. Now, one of the things that we learned in the community outreach component of this is that the neighbors and the citizens of this community, the people who live in this community, they didn't want a monolithic building, a monochromatic building that looks like the stone buildings here. They didn't want to reject them. They wanted to resonate with them, but they wanted color. They wanted polychroma that represented the diversity, the sense of pride they had in their community, of all the different shades of people, they used to say. And so how could we bring that forward? Which is terrifying, I don't know, to most architects, is to take color on the inside and put it on the outside. As you can see the way I'm dressed, sort of terrified of color. But we had to do it. And fortunately, I have some good people, including my partner, Ati, who, being from Malaysia, loves color. So we make a great pair. So anyways, we began to think about how we would do this. And we sort of thought of this as a coat of many colors, maybe a patchwork, a quilt even. And we were inspired by Gee's Bend ladies, the quilt ladies of Gee's Bend. This is in a remote part of Alabama. These are African-American women, Black women, who live on the oxbow of a river, who, while their husbands were away in World War II, would take scraps of material, basically rags, and repurpose them into beautifully composed quilts. And I've gone there to Alabama many times as part of the Rural Studio and visited these folks and the Petway family, who run this quilting co-op. And so we use this as an inspiration about arranging color and accents, and that everything doesn't have to be a kaleidoscope. It can be very carefully controlled. And so the material that we chose was terracotta, because they wanted material as resilient as the stone, so glazed terracotta with color. We did over nearly 100 different color schemes to finally arrive on one that was acceptable. And I think we did a fairly good job in terms of resonating with the stone buildings, the limestone buildings, as well as bringing in accent and color to help activate that facade, all done in these series of ribbed terracotta panels. And then we used the windows to capture light from above, from the side, from the front, to animate the facade. And then to set up the administration to where they can see who's coming and going into the school. And the walls of the school, the entry, just gently lean in to welcome you as a very gentle, kind of graceful entry to slip inside. Inside is the first courtyard. There are 3 courtyards that provide light. On the left is a coffee shop for families. On the right, a series of community rooms, the lobby. So you can drop your child off, but you can stay all day if you want. And just, again, make this as much a community center as it is a place of lifelong learning. The community centers or the community rooms are lit from above and activated by local community groups, both during the day and after hours. This is a staff courtyard. The staff lounge has their own break room, administrative area, place for them to go out and, again, take a break, relax, and get back to work. Every space, corridor, everything is a learning opportunity. We carved seating areas in there, desks, everything is a place of learning. The outside, the courtyard is a classroom. The corridors are classrooms. The classrooms are classrooms. And these are all sort of organized sectionally differently. You can see the kind of variety of section in the drawing that gives character specifically to each individual classroom. No classroom is exactly like the other. Each classroom has direct connection to the outdoors so that a lesson happening on the inside can immediately be translated on the outside and help develop an analogy with nature with something you're learning about in math on the inside. So all of these things can happen in real time. And you have to imagine living in the city, in a city that has a lot of, I would say, detritus and a lot of ruin. The idea to be in touch with nature every day as a child is something that's really, I think, stimulating and very activating in the learning thought process. And so you take lunch out here, you play out here, you study out here. It's all part of the daily life of the school. And then the big porch on the south end that shades classrooms, an active play area and learning area is woven through the trees by Margie Ruddick, our landscape architect, and really brings this this whole grove of trees as part of a learning scape as well. And one of the words I like to use, I know Kolkata likes to use the word joy to describe its place. That's the word I use to describe the school when I go. Joy, joy in the students' eyes, joy in the staff, joy with the families to have this place reactivated again and have their community, stimulated and revitalized. I went back to Alabama and to see Miss Petway and her co-op of quilters. And as I was talking to her, I said, we just completed this building that I'd come to talk to you about a few years back. She said, oh yeah. And so I showed it to her on the phone and she looked at it and she said, you've given me an idea for a quilt. And so it all kind of comes back around in many ways. So this idea of courtyards also translates to the house. We don't do a lot of houses, but I was inspired looking at Charles's work. Just let me bring a couple of houses. He didn't do a lot either, but a lot of housing, but not a lot of house. But so I wanted to show a couple of houses, just taking the typology of the courtyard and seeing how that can be the true organizer and the sort of hearth and heart of a domestic situation. So we were asked to design a brick house. It was a dream of this 70-year-old couple to have a courtyard house. And it's built in all places in a golf club neighborhood. And of course, it has the covenants. You have to have, rows that do this and all this, but it didn't say what slope. So we did this. And we took the water, we looked at Roman and Pluvian houses. We bring the water into the courtyard. We got past the covenants. They realized they'd screwed up, but it's too late. And so we made a figured sort of beautiful facade with indigenous prairie grasses that are local to where we live, and a simple courtyard. And you can see what the houses look like around it. So it's certainly a diamond in the rough. No pun intended about the golf. But you're dropped off here, skylight, just texturing the brick for the frontality. And basically what this is, as a slope, because it's the Ozarks, we're in the mountains as well, we kind of allow it to disengage. So the house literally floats above the ground to make that connection. And then the series of bedrooms and offices engage at the perimeter. Dramatic entry to kind of bring you up, graceful to get your, the car underneath to get you out of the rain. But if you look at the plan, that whole front facade is basically a thick wall of services, bathrooms, storage, technical services, and we carved a library into it as well. And so we're basically carving. You can sit in the thickness of the wall. Rather than being solid, it's more void. But we're activating that through the thickness and this sort of public face of the building to the neighborhood. But the courtyard is the real feature here. Everything is organized around the courtyard, the living room, dining, kitchen, and bedrooms. And again, you see how the light works both from the courtyard side and then from above, where we bring light from the sky. Now, because we're in the mountains, we don't want to just flatten out the site. So we allow the courtyard to step down the slope underneath the fourth elevation, which now becomes a covered bridge, a porch that floats. And then this leads out into the woods where the wildlife is. So here you begin to see how this works with, again, the landscape that continues right on through, out, and under. Of course, we light it up at night, it becomes quite ambient. But it's also going through its own process of transformation as it moves from this formal figured identity on the public side of the building. It transforms now into a simple frame porch to the landscape beyond. So it moves from mass and volume to line and plane. So in a similar spirit, we had an opportunity to do a very small house, about a 2,500 square foot house. Director of the museum that we showed you earlier, he and his wife and two girls wanted a house, and they too wanted an idea of a courtyard. And the house literally backs up to the campus of the museum, so he could just come through his house, walk down the backyard, go through the fence, and then walk to work along the pathways. So this is called the A Street House, or what we like to call the bow tie house. And these are very social people. They like to entertain. They like to interact with their neighbors. They're not very pretentious. They don't want a garage. They have a carport that can become a place to grill hamburgers or something. We didn't have a lot of money in the sense that literally, I'll go back. That roof is PVC roof. We didn't have the money for metal. And then you just glue on the seams. So it looks like it is metal. So, it's like honest fakery is what we got. But, so a very nice porch to kind of welcome, almost theatrical in a way, local landscape. And you can get to see the museum, and in the red is the house. So it has this sort of connectivity to the pathway journeys that begin to connect it to the museum campus. And it has its own courtyard as well. And so in a similar fashion, it's a bifurcated courtyard situation. So bifurcated house. So to the north is the living, to the south is the bedrooms, and then connected in between is the dining. So this is the porch to come underneath, deep and again, very welcoming to anybody passing by with their dog or, just walking. As you come inside, it bifurcates. So you get the courtyard down the middle, on the right to the bedrooms, on the left to the living and to the office. And again, we're pitching and rolling the roof because it had to be one floor. And so by that pitching and rolling, it allows us to get a lot of different sectional character in the house. Very simple, rather than just making a box. So very open plan. Kind of, you're up in the trees, so you feel like you're in a tree house. It's very simply furnished. For director of an art museum, they don't have a lot of art, but I guess he sees art all day, sees enough. I want to see nature. So here's how the courtyard works. Surprisingly, it works very much like the last house. You come through, you come down the steps, the planters underneath into the outdoor area, and then there's a material logic. The outside is all shoshujiban, burnt wood, and then on the inside it's all painted white here. So just a simple palette of black and white. You can begin to see in the section how that works, and then it just floats across, and that's the dining area, kind of bridging between the bedroom and the living areas. And then that sort of cascades on down into the whole kind of backyard, and then from there. And if you'll see the door on your left opened, that is an exact copy of a 1920s Parisian speakeasy. And I never knew he was making it the whole time until I was taking a tour of Texas Architects. And I opened the door and said, and this is the mechanical room. And I opened the door and it's like, oh my God. And he was there behind the bar mixing drinks. It was very strange, very surreal. So a great client to have. So housing is something we're just now getting into. We haven't really had that much opportunity where we're at, but we're hoping to find some here very soon. But this is housing. While I was in Detroit, I met a developer who works with empty spaces, and he works with a system called the Quonset hut to gather those together to make affordable housing. So we thought, well, maybe I could try that where I grew up in Dallas-Fort Worth. So there was an emerging neighborhood called the Magnolia Village in Fort Worth, and he wanted to try a mixed-use development there using the Quonset hut. Now, typically, this is how you find a Quonset hut. It was invented during World War II for equipment storage, troops, something that set up very quickly, and it was, very durable. It's in an agricultural setting. Typically, you don't find it in an urban condition, but we thought we would put the machine in the garden and see how that would play out. So it's a series of 8 apartments built atop offices, all made out of concrete block. And then along the street edge is a restaurant, a small grab-and-go cafe, and a bookshop. But the key to this is that he could have made 5 stories, a big block of cheese, 5 stories high, and filled out all the way to the perimeter. But his strategy is to use public space, that's why it's called PS 1200, as the generator of the connection to the community and to invite everyone in. Now, this is located not far from a very well-known Louis Kahn building, the Kimball Art Museum, about 1.5 miles away. And so we were inspired by that. We thought, well, what if we could take this inspiration of the Kahn, as you see, museum in the middle, one of the great American art museums, and ennoble the prosaic with this simple system of the Quonset, only to realize that Kahn had been looking at the stockyards, the cattle stockyards in Fort Worth, when he was actually designing the Kimball Art Museum. So he'd already beat us to it. But anyways, this is how we kind of came up with this sort of serialization of the huts. They're all in structure. You go up in like 1 day, day and a half, once you have the base all ready to go to receive it. So it's a very quick, all prefabricated. And just very simple serialized plan. You enter between the huts to go up and enter on the second floor. And then the offices you can see are down below. But it's all infilled with public space, a plaza. This is a plaza made out of recycled stone and local cedar. It eventually will grow into a forest to kind of cover up the trees. That was my landscape architect, Julie Bargman's idea, is to get rid of the architecture through the trees. We'll see how that goes. But one of the things that we had to do to keep consistent is take the Quonsets and turn them on their side. And so by doing that, we were able to continue the language, but we turned it from structure into cladding. And so it comes up with a whole different set of details because these are not prefabricated details like the others. So we had to create our own eccentricities of this window that kind of comes out. It's in the kitchen of the restaurant. So you walk by the sidewalk, you can see into the kitchen, carving away for the grab and go, just different details for windows and doors and that sort of thing. And all the interstitial spaces become public space. And it's really being absorbed now by the community. Small businesses like barbershops and small dress shops, things like that, are now moving into the office areas. Living is very simple, just a big barrel vault, 2-story. Inserted in that is a service core with the bedroom, bathrooms, kitchen, all made out of just a Baltic plywood. porches along the alleyway in the back for each tenant. We're even shaping the trees to look like the huts. That's a joke, not doing that. And then we had the rear window moment where we had everybody pull their shades up and get the view. Nobody died in that operation. But this has become a development that's a kind of model for development. How do I start with the idea of space, public space first, and then generate the development around it? And then how do I allow that to emerge to plug itself into an existing community? And I think they found it much more acceptable by the people of this community, and cost effective. So I've gotten to talk to a good amount of folks in the last couple of days about hospitality, hotels, things of that nature. We've been working with Tishman Speyer as a developer that likes architects, believe it or not, and likes design, and likes to give architects the opportunity to design something they've never designed before. And so we were selected to be part of something called the Enterprise Research Campus. It's a series of research labs. This is across from the Harvard Business School in Boston, Massachusetts, in Allston, right across the Charles River. But it's across from the Harvard Business School. It's a conference center by Gang Studio, along with another lab by Gang Studio. Henning Larson doing a lab, as well as MVRDV doing housing. This is housing that has 25% affordable housing embedded in it as well, and then a new 250-room hotel, which is what we were assigned to do. Something we've never done a tall building, and nor had we done a hotel. So a great opportunity. And what holds it all together, again, is public space, a greenway by Scape Landscape that ties all different parts of this working class neighborhood, Allston, together, cuts through an industrial rail yard that you see in this outlined in red, an old industrial rail yard. And that greenway, a series of forest, bikeways, fountains that cut all the way to the Charles River. And when we got the project, it was already massed out according to sun and light, wind. And so the massing really created the volumes already, and that's what we were given. So I sort of thought of it as a kind of still life, these different volumes on a table. But we're located on the corner of Western Ave. We're not really part of the center part of the development as so much. And we began to think about how could we insert a portrait into the still life by developing a visage on the north side that would open up the hotel to the activity and variety of guests that would be staying there, how they move the curtains around, how they occupy the room, either during the day or at night, and enliven that facade. And that was sort of the thinking around it, and then shape it according to different views. So distant views to the Boston skyline, locally to the Allston neighborhood, as well as across the street to the Harvard Business School campus. So just a simple operational diagrams. The master planning, we were given a table and tower. We said, let's establish frontality. So rather than two figures, we make a single figure. We activate the ground floor with all kinds of local retail, restaurant, a living room, which is the lobby, and then local businesses. And then we shape it to the skyline and the context, so you create this whole very distinct iconic figure, and then enhance the streets around it. So we're cantilevering porches, and we're developing an extension of the urban public space in the center to the perimeter of the site. And then this is the figure that you arrive at. And so this is it. And it's all done with this soap bubble glass. So it's inverted mullions that create something very taut. And then the material logic, as you see on the lower left here, is wrapped in three sides of this lustrous champagne-colored metal panel system. And I'll show you a little bit about that here in a minute. So it's very subtle, but here's the housing, the lab, the conference center all coming together. And then you begin to see how that starts to wrap around. And the articulation of the tower is achieved through a series of slightly curved panels that help kind of reflect the light. The glass changes, of course, over the course of the day. Sometimes it's just highly reflective and opaque, sometimes more transparent, depending on where the time of season, the time of day that it is. And again, a series of cantilevers on either end on the east and west sides to create interface porches with the laneway that connect to the greenway. We widened the sidewalk by pushing the glass storefronts to the back of the columns, the structure, to give additional width there. And you can begin to see how these come. So these scalloped panels, again, really begin to activate the light. We were only allowed 8 inches to work off of, so we did a counter move of a cove. That one detail solves all the transition details between each of the panels, as well as between the panels and the glass. Very simply resolved. The developer loved it because it's one material, one detail, and it didn't have to keep inventing new details. And so this is it along for this north side, along the street edge that was very activated. The entry, so that's pushed back. That was conceived, the lobby of the hotel, as the living room for the street, and it's public, so people can come in. They're welcome to use it, everything from, office work, however they want to use it. It's also with art. It connects to a local restaurant. This is owned by someone from Nepal, so it's Afro-Caribbean Nepalese food. It's really amazing and terribly spicy, which is so good. And so we were allowed to do, we didn't do the lobby that was ink architecture or the rooms, but we did do the restaurant, so forth, and just opened up and quite successful. The rooms are quite nice, very elegantly restrained, with nice views, always to the different parts of the site and the city around it. And then a series of spaces too. So at the 6th floor is outdoor terrace, as well as the top floor, an outdoor bar top terrace with views to the distant skyline. So you can begin to see how that's activated. So again, the idea of public space translates vertically all the way up. And then a bar, rooftop bar at the very top that really kind of becomes something not only for the day, but for the evening as well, and this kind of connectivity to the outdoors and to the city beyond. And then you get an idea of the light and how it works on these scallops. Again, just a simple, repetitive, serialized panel system that we sort of invented for the cladding here. Happy client right here. This is Rustam Kawasji. He's from Pakistan, Zoroastrian from Pakistan, architect, design director of Tishman Spire, and gave us this great opportunity to do this. And we're still friends after it was all over. So that's always a good goal if you're an architect, to still be friends. I think he's still friends. I don't know. So he's got a good sense of humor. So towers are things that we hadn't done anything that tall, but we are working on a tower right now that's infrastructure. It's asked to be iconic. And so we're working on a new air traffic control tower in Columbus, Indiana. And this is an interesting town of about 50,000 south of Indianapolis. It's one of the 6 most visited cities in the U.S. For architecture. It has a design excellence program. You've probably heard of Cummins engines. That's where they're made. They started a design excellence program 80 years ago with Eero Saarinen and Elio Saarinen. And they designed churches, city halls, businesses, all kinds of civic schools, everything over the last 80 years. It's an architectural mecca. And this is the first time they've actually tried to do it with infrastructure, a air traffic control tower out at the airport there. And so we were selected to do that, and we're very excited about getting re-involved with this program. So it's a city of towers. So the Lutheran Church, the First Christian, North Christian, all of these. And so this would be the next tower. And each of these towers are located east, west, and south, but there's no tower to the north. So this will be the first one as you come driving south from Indianapolis that you'll see. I used to be a cartoonist, so I kind of developed everything in silhouette in a very kind of expressive way, but economy of lines. And so we we're sketching, and the client, the owner, began to latch onto this simple planar figure, anthropomorphic figure, and how it could be layered into planes to make the tower. And so we tested that out with the different types of volumes, even using the leg lamp from Christmas Story. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that movie, but we got carried away. But iteration is very important to us to really get the client involved and make sure we're making the right decision. So this is the current air traffic control tower. You have to go up in the winter, the open stair. If you use the restroom and air traffic control tower, the toilet is in the room, and you have to sit on the toilet and look out to see the planes land. You can never leave. So they definitely need a new air traffic control tower. So this is what we proposed, which is a singular 130-foot high tower, all out of angel bead blasted stainless steel on the south side just to reflect the light, and then a series of aluminum fins that help control the light on the east and west. There's the cab at the top, and then all the equipment is covered up at the top, in the cap on the top, and then windows out to the north that you can see the airport and all the cornfields surrounding it. So this is a public lawn that it sits in. It's where they have their Renaissance Fair. The widened area in the center of the tower is widened because it will become the first controlled public access for an air traffic control tower in the country. So basically allowing the public to come in, using it as a community service, being part of this public lawn. It's all part of an economic and educational hub in Columbus. And we've been working with the metals company, A. Zahner, develop a prefabricated way to make the fins, to make the construction very easy to do. And then in that middle, the briefing room, break room, all of that opens up and creates these very eccentric spaces on the inside. We're just now developing that and how that will be fitted out. But it all is set up for the public. So one of the things that we're also working with the owner on is what happens at night. So the tower shuts down at 10 p.m. That's when the planes, because it's a small airport. So what could happen before or even after? So they're working with a company to actually project light onto it so that it becomes public art. In this case, this is an actual live lunar eclipse happening on the other side of the world that could actually have people gathered, and again, it becomes a public icon, but something that is public space, right? And that's something that continues the use of this. And again, we're back to 1 + 1 has to equal 3. So I have 2 projects I want to show you. One last infrastructural project some people have asked about, so I thought I'll be sure and show this one, and then our school at the end. One of the questions we've asked ourselves is, how could we take the culture of a place and allow it to literally manifest and shape a building? We were asked to do by WeWork their first ground-up building. And so we teamed with their architecture department, and for the design phase, 50-50 design. Michel Rochkin, well-known Mexican architect, was heading their architecture department with his team, Kristen Callahan, Haruka Rucci, and others, to design a 200,000 square foot office building in Bentonville, Arkansas, which is the headquarters for Walmart. So we were very mindful that the #1 current destination in America for mountain biking is in Bentonville. So they've invested heavily in greenways and biking trails, and it's a big part of the culture. So we thought, what if we could make the world's first bikeable building, where you could bike up 6 floors to get to your office, or you can walk up. So it's all about mobility, well-being, and creating an ecosystem of co-working environment, inside, outside. And so that is called the Ledger. And so it's part public space, part infrastructure, it's office building, event space, all of that in downtown, about 4 blocks from the downtown square of Bentonville, along with its own parking garage and its own sort of public art vertical surface as well. and just simple copper spandrels with glass, and then everything is at 1 to 21. So again, it's 3/4 of a mile up. It's 3/4 of a mile from the town square, so you can go up from the town square to the top, hang out on a series of ledges, come back down, and you get your 10,000 steps, right? All in one trip. So this is it here and how it's activated. Again, bikers, walkers, skateboarders, or people just hanging out on the ledges. And kind of get a sense of that. The ledges, kind of landscape, all of this is public. So we're distributing public space upward here. I thought I'd just play this one little 60-second video here just to show you how people are using it. And so far, no one has fallen off. So it's all worked out. But you can see it's an amphitheater type space up there to see sunsets, all of that. So an interesting thing about this is that it's a 6-story building in a small town, the tallest building in the town. But the massing, because of the zigzag of the ramps, begins to let it stair step backwards. And so what happens is a 6-story building feels very different from the top down to the bottom. And so it feels more like a 1 or 2-story building at the ground level. And then we have our dog trot, our portico that you come through to start your way up the ramp. But it has a very kind of human scale at the bottom. And so when you're inside, you're always very mindful of the outside. And so the exterior inscribes itself on the interior. And you begin to see this sort of activation, mobility. And so it's very alive. It's the co-working. It's really a community. You can think about it, where the city basically interfaces with this co-working environment on the inside. And then, of course, lights up at night. So the last project I want to share with you, I think, is something we've been very interested in, is in schools, and how schools can dignify and inspire learning, and not just rote learning, but learning, thinking about it beyond the abstract, but into the realm of project-based learning, making, much the way we learn as architects and designers. So this is a independent school. It's a project-based school in Bentonville. It's called the Thaden School. It's got index tuition, which means that anyone can go here. You just pay based on what your family income is. So some people are paying $500 a year, some are paying $25,000 a year. But about 80% of the students are on some form of financial assistance. This is Louise Thaden. You've probably never heard of her, but you've heard of Amelia Earhart, I'll bet. This was Amelia Earhart's friend and colleague, Louise Thaden. She was born in Bentonville. She was a pioneer in aviation. She learned to fly flying through barns. She was a barnstormer. She grew up in Bentonville and then went on to California and Kitty Hawk for her career. But she's the muse here. This idea of roots and wings, that we set down our roots and foundations and understand our place, right, as a place to learn, but that we are given wings through the learning to go anywhere and become part of the world, right? So the local and the global fuse here in this learning environment. So it's a 30-acre campus, very simple palette of materials, basically metal, plywood, some all-wood buildings. We're doing this in conjunction with Eskew Dumez Ripple, who did the home building, the gray building, and then Andrew Pogon, who did the landscape. We all work together on the master planning. And there's 3 signature programs here: Wheels, Meals, and Reel. Each student is given a bicycle. They learn how to work on bikes. They learn how to fabricate bikes, and all the collateral learning that comes with that project-based effort. There's also Reels. Each student learns how to tell stories using animation and film. And then Meals. Each student learns how to grow food, how to harvest food, how to cook food. And so you're developing a kind of resiliency and an agency in the students through this learning, along with all the other foundational learning that they get. And all of this ties together for the Thaden experience. And it all happens in what we call the urban pastoral. It's 8 blocks from the town square, but it's clearly not urban. It used to be part of the county fairgrounds back 100 years ago. So we were looking at chicken houses, farm groupings, barns as a way to kind of think about how we master plan and learn from the vernacular locally. And so the whole layout is designed for the campus to be one big classroom. So you learn about indigenous planting on the campus. You learn about the circulation or connectivity. There are no canopies to keep you dry or snow or that. You're to use the campus. So you move across the campus, not along pathways per se. All the water management is didactic. You can learn from that. It has a water lab on the southeast corner, different types of landscapes that are indigenous to the local, as well as types of programming that are connected, and a community geothermal system that allows you to plug in additional buildings. And so they're basically, it's the Wheels building, the Reels building, the Performance Hall, the Home building, which has the dining, as well as the library, and then the Bike Barn, which is the gym. So very quickly, the Reels building here, we're using pitch and roll again in the roof. That's how you guide a plane, pitch and roll. But that sets up right as a way to get light down into the building, as well as to create that sectional difference. These are all one-story buildings. And then we're just using, again, local plywood, box rib metal as the primary system. Of course, this intersection of nature-made or culture-made and nature-made happens. We're automotive body paints. This time we're using a 67 Shelby GT Cobra, green gold, and we're then tuning that green with Osage prairie grasses, the green to get the exact custom specific color, and then we're using gold metal flake to make that, and it makes for a wonderful fusion of nature and color throughout the year. Cutting these dog trots through the linear inflected bar buildings. Again, all of this is part of the classroom, but these become places of transition, but also outdoor classrooms, covered classrooms. They use chalk to do their lessons and so forth on the concrete. On the inside, the most social space, the hallway, you'll notice there's no lights in the ceiling for maintenance purposes. Natural light washes through. You really don't need a lot of light. We have up lighting, but simple concrete floors, very simple materials. In the Wheels building, that's where the robotics are, a bike shop, a wood shop, and because its own folded porch to shield from the sun. But also the bike shop opens up and allows the students to bring their bikes out onto the sidewalk, work on it. They have a community service engagement working on citizens' bikes in this town. Here again, it's everybody has to do this. Part of your learning about how to fix things, how to make things. On the south side is a whole productive landscape gardens. That's where they also get their lunches from. They are constantly using things they bring out of the garden and testing in the kitchen. Great place for lunch. The Performance Hall was something I designed while I was at the American Academy in Rome. So it's got a little bit of Rome in it. 300-foot long loggia, urban edge, an open plaza next to the music room where they have public receptions. Not to be outdone, we're using a 71 gold green Camaro for the paint varieties here. This linear porch is the lobby. They don't have a lobby. This is shared with the community, so they have receptions and events here as well. Once you go inside, the practice rooms are on the left, drama, music, and then on the right, the vomitorium that allows you to slip into the auditorium where they have theater, music performances. This is all done with local Arkansas red oak plywood. It's all kind of folded for acoustics. And then one big monumental window that's carefully sculpted, just a simply curved, hand-troweled plaster. The only plaster is the one left in the state of Arkansas to help bring the light in a very sculptural way into the space. It's still a classroom as well, so you have connection with nature. And then that figure is opposed by a more angular figure on the outside that acts as this sort of wonderful backdrop to the learning that goes on in the campus. And the last building I'd like to share with you is what we call the Bike Barn. and we had to get bikes back in there somehow. So the headmaster's dream was to have a real barn, an Ozark barn. What he didn't know is I'd been working on this barn for about 30 years. So finally the commission had come, and he wanted to be naturally ventilated. So we worked and did research to figure out how to get the right gaps between the boards, using copper screen to keep insects out, using the barn doors to open up, and then ventilating chimneys as dormers to create a chimney effect to pull the air through. And it creates a whole new figure. And then it has a public bike pump track that's available to anybody in the community, and bikes can ride through it and over it and through the barn. These are the ventilating chimneys you see in the dormers. Every other window opens up to get air to come through. Has its own porch here. It's all painted in traditional Ozark barn red. And it's a timber building. Now, we didn't have the money for mass timber, so what we used was a mass of timber. So we just gang nailed trusses, local residential wood truss manufacturers, to gang nail it together to make our own simple truss. You can see the gambrel truss of the traditional Ozark barn outlined on the interface, and then it expands upward and outwards to capture the porch, the mezzanine, and the dormers. And then all of that comes together, and when it's opened up, it's like a big naturally ventilated pavilion where they shoot basketball, do gymnastics and such. Very simple porch here, beautifully crafted. It's hard to get wood to be straight for that long, but we were able to do it. And then our lighting designer came up with a brilliant idea. As the sun sets, he uplights the building in very hidden ways, where the light slowly comes on and it becomes somewhat translucent. And then as the sunset drops over the horizon, it becomes transparent and acts as a beacon for the school and a sort of landmark in many ways for the community. So I'll end with a few thoughts, and I appreciate your attention. So anyways, I hope you appreciate my insistence for proposing meaningful, purposeful, intimate places for people of all walks of life to live their lives with meaning and purpose. So how should we assess a society? Perhaps best by a society's care for its children, for its elderly, for the less advantaged, by its equitable provision for a full quality of life to all, and this in part to its architecture, to the equitable provision for quality of life for all, by its human social architecture. So how should we assess the practice of architecture in that society? Perhaps best by its cultivation of literacy, of education, of civic gathering, of individual and collective worship, of physical and mental well-being, and this ultimately by the demonstrated built commitment to architecture as a humane social practice, a practice that provides the gift of connections to our place, to our communities, to each other, to the past, to the present, to the deep possibilities of tomorrow, one gentle transgression at a time. This is the fundamental and radical proposition we are making, and I believe that Charles was making as well. From this perspective, there is first and foremost a core principle at the heart of the practice, radical in its fundamental simplicity, the assertion of the making of buildings and places as a constant, authentic focus. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marlon. That was absolutely amazing. And this evening perhaps reminded us that architecture is ultimately about people, places, and possibilities. Thank you so much for coming and attending this session. Thank you, Marlon, for this wonderful, thought-provoking session. Very inspiring. And we hope to meet again next year. Thank you so much.